you for your abundant blessings. We thank you that you are a great God and you know us and you love us. And as we consider health and healing, as we consider what is best for us, we ask for you to teach us and to help us to enter into things that maybe we haven't thought of yet. But be our teacher today, we pray in Jesus' name. Amen. All right. So we are going to be talking about the law of life. The law of life, if you're interested in following along with the resource, then there is a book, The Law of Life, that can be found on Amazon. And that's the cover to it. And the, Amazon, it's either paperback or it's in Kindle form. It can also be found at Yuchi Pine's gift shop, which we do have an online store, or at betterlivingcreations.com. That's betterlivingcreations.com. And we are going to dive right into the meeting now. And we're going to look at this analogy of a tree. I like analogies, I like stories. One thing that we know that we can, people relate to stories well. They relate to analogies very well. And they're very helpful for us. You don't remember so much about what somebody said to you as far as words or maybe principles long ago, but you'll remember stories and you'll remember how you feel or how they made you feel. So here's a tree. Let's imagine that it's fruit season and it's time for fruit, and you are going for a walk and you notice a tree. What's one of the first things that you notice about a tree? Well, yeah, you notice maybe its shape. Maybe you notice the leaves. Maybe, of course, if it's a fruit tree, you notice the fruit that are growing on it. Maybe the trunk of the tree. You don't usually notice the roots right off the bat, and so that's common. The fruit and the leaves in this case, in this tree, are going to represent our symptoms. Symptoms are the obvious things when it comes to disease, and when it comes to that disease and when it comes to symptoms, there are certain things that we have, like pain and coughing and itching and other things like that, that are symptoms that are sometimes a bit annoying to us. They're things that we don't like. We would prefer to be without them. And so symptoms represent bad fruit and bad leaves on our tree. These fruit and these leaves, if you have bad fruit and bad leaves on your tree, does it take care of the problem to pluck off the bad fruit and the bad leaves? Well, no, it doesn't take care of the problem. It will decrease the manifestation. It will decrease the disease burden, but it won't take away the problem entirely, because the problem is not just the fruit and the leaves. The fruit and the leaves don't just grow by themselves. Now, if you have pain, we'll just use that as our example. If you have pain and your response to pain is to take a pain pill, well, you can go to your doctor and tell them that you have pain, you've got pain in your back, and you need something for it. And so the doctor gives you a pain pill, and you take that pain pill, and it helps with the pain, and things are going, a little better, but it's not great. You still have pain. So you go back to the doctor and you tell them it's not working great, and so you ask if there's anything else, and so you get a second medication, and that helps a little more, but you're still having pain in the back, and you go back for a third. And so now you've got 3 medications, and it's working a lot better than what it was before. And now you're taking 3. Pain is doing much better, but you're still not satisfied. You want to be pain-free. And so instead of going back to the same doctor, you go to a second doctor to get another opinion, and that doctor does an exam, and they discover that there's a problem, and the problem is you have, well, you have a knife stuck in your back. Yeah, well, that's interesting. So the manifestation of the knife in your back was pain. That was its manifestation. And the solution that you went to, or that was found early on, was just a medication to take care of the pain. But did that pill that numbed the pain, did it take care of the cause? Well, obviously not, because you're still there with a knife stuck in your back. And so no, it didn't remove the cause. It only removed the symptoms. It only removed its manifestation. So we can treat our symptoms. We can treat that pain or that cough or that itching or whatever it is. We can treat it with medication. But as long as the medication does not take away the cause, then if the cause remains, then we've got a problem. Now, it's not just medication. It's true for herbs too. It's true for surgery. It's true for any remedy, whether it's a natural remedy or synthetic thing or whatever it is. Through any remedy that does not remove the cause, but just treats the symptoms, any of those remedies are then going to be somewhat problematic. And we're going to talk about how problematic they are today in the context of another analogy of the road. So just plucking off the fruit, just plucking off the leaves of the diseased fruit and the diseased leaves of our tree it's not going to fix it. It's not going to solve our problem. And so we're going to need to go a little bit deeper. The problem is that the fruit and the leaves grow on something. They grow on the branches. And the branches represent our behaviors. Branches represent our behaviors. So our behaviors are very simple things. I also call them actions. And these actions are things like breathing and drinking and eating and exposing and things like that. These are very simple things. They're very basic behaviors or actions, but they're there in order to support healthy fruit and healthy leaves. If you have good branches, if you have good behaviors or actions, then that's going to tend to develop good fruit and good leaves. But if you have bad branches, so the branches themselves are diseased, if the eating is bad, the drinking is bad, the breathing is bad, and so on, well, then it's going to promote bad fruit and bad leaves. So does it fix the problem to prune the branches? Well, the answer is no, it doesn't fix the problem to prune the branches, but it can reduce the disease burden to prune the branches. Now, I started my career in conventional medicine. I went all the way through medical school. I did a specialty in emergency medicine, and I was practicing in ER and urgent care and ICU and hospital and so on. A lot of different clinic settings or clinical settings. And much of what I was doing was symptom care. Now, I went into medicine in order to help people. I didn't go into medicine in order to just put Band-Aids on gushing arteries. And so after a while, I became a bit more disillusioned with my practice because I really wanted to help people. And I found that what I was doing wasn't actually really helping them in the long run. Sure, there were the people that came in crisis or car accident or other types of things like that, or a poisoning, and I was able to help them. There were some people that lived through their traumas because of quick intervention, and I was very grateful to be involved in those situations. But I was not happy really with where I was at and what was going on. And I knew that what I needed to do is to help individuals to change their lifestyles. I needed, instead of to medicate, I needed to educate. And so that began to be a focus of mine, and I ended up switching my career focus, and I came here to Uchee Pines and to learn more about natural remedies and changing lifestyle and so on. And now I'm board certified in lifestyle medicine as well as emergency medicine. And it's been a joy and a privilege to work here. But one of the things that I ran into after I was here for a while is I felt like we were still running into problems. Why were we running into problems? Because we were using I was using herbs instead of pills, and we were using hydrotherapy instead of surgery, and we were using, we had switched what we were using, but the basic way of treating an individual really didn't change. And sometimes it seemed like things were just not as effective as I thought they should be. And that began more of a desire to study deeper into the human being and into health and illness and wellness and what are the factors that go into that. And so we are going to be journeying together through this week in regards to that whole idea, what I have learned from that standpoint and what we can all learn together. And by no means have I learned it all. I'm still in the process of learning. So the behaviors, the branches don't grow by themselves. So just pruning the branches is not going to take care of the problem, because the branches grow off of a trunk. And a trunk represents what? It represents our needs. It represents our needs. What are the things that we need? Well, we need things like oxygen. We need water. We need food. We need sunshine. We need warmth, and so on. These are various different basic needs that we have. Everything that you need is a need because of who or what you are. We are human beings, and so we need certain levels of oxygen, we need certain amounts of water, we need certain nutrients in certain levels, we need certain amounts of sun exposure, and so on, in order for us to function optimally. And when those levels of oxygen, water, food, sunshine, and so on get too high or get too low, then we can have problems. We can have dysfunction that's going on there. So what is it? The need never changes, by the way, because that's based upon what you are. And what you are doesn't change. And whether you believe you are what you are doesn't matter, because you are what you are. And so what you believe about what you need doesn't make a difference about what you need. You need what you need because of what you are. Everything that you need, does it reside within you or does it reside outside of you? Meaning the thing that you need, like the oxygen, the water, and the food, and so on. Those things that you need, are they inside of you or are they outside of you? Well, of course, they're outside of you. You need oxygen that is outside of you, and you must bring it in so that you might have the oxygen you need to live by. The water that you need resides outside of you, and you need to bring it in so that you can have the water you need in order to live. The food that you need resides outside of you, and you must bring it in order that it might become a part of you so that you have it. So what's the purpose of the behaviors? The purpose of the behaviors is to supply that which you need. The eating is there so that you might bring in the food. The drinking is there so that you might bring in the water. The breathing is there so that you might bring in the oxygen, and so on and so forth. The various behaviors are there so that you can bring in the very things that you need. And when the behaviors match with what you need, then that will promote healthy fruit and healthy leaves. But if the behaviors do not match with what you need, then you're going to end up with bad fruit and bad leaves. You'll have symptoms that you don't want to have. That makes sense? Well, the trunk does not grow by itself. What does the trunk grow off of? It grows off of the roots, of course. And the roots represent our beliefs. Now, it's not so clear. When you run into an individual, if they're having symptoms, if you're having symptoms, it's pretty obvious, but sometimes we don't even know what we believe. We really don't. And so this gets below the ground. So if you really want to know what's going on with the individual and with their health, then you got to dig. You got to dig and find out what they believe. Why is that important? Well, you do what you do because you believe what you believe. So beliefs drive your behaviors. If you, for example, if you believe that you need Dr. Pepper, what are you going to do? You're going to drink Dr. Pepper. But do you need Dr. Pepper? The answer is, no matter how much you kick and scream about it, the answer is no. You don't need Dr. Pepper. So if you believe that you need it, but you don't need it, then you're going to behave in a way to supply something that you don't need. And in supplying something that you don't need, now you have excess, or you have something that even shouldn't be there. Now you end up with bad fruit and bad leaves. If your belief, let's say that you believe that you need water, great, you need water. But let's say that you believe that you need 4 or 5 gallons of water a day. What are you going to do? Well, you're going to at least attempt to drink 4 or 5 gallons of water a day if that's what you believe that you need. But do you need that much water? No, you don't need that much water. If you accomplish drinking that much water every day, you're going to kill yourself, because you're going to flush out your electrolytes, your sodium levels are going to go so low, your brain's going to swell, and you'll die, because your belief driving your behavior does not match with what you need, and you'll end up with bad fruit and bad leaves. So only when your beliefs line up with your needs are your behaviors going to then line up with your needs, and then you're going to have healthy fruit and healthy leaves. So it's vitally important what somebody believes. And nobody is going to change their beliefs except if they are given information. One needs to be given information that one can use as a basis for their belief. And the only way that you're going to take that information as your own is if you trust the source that it comes from. So if you trust the source that it comes from, you will take the information, and from the information, you will build your beliefs. And that will then impact your behaviors, which, if it meets with your needs, if the belief is based on truth, then the behaviors will be right. They will match with your needs, and you'll have good fruit and good leaves. You'll have good symptoms. Now, there's one other aspect of this that still remains. If you have a tree that is diseased, that has bad fruit and bad leaves, where is the problem? Well, the problem usually is not in the tree. The problem is usually in the soil. So you don't fix the tree, you fix the soil. And the soil represents your sources, that which you take from. So you can believe that you need a correct amount of water, you can drink a correct amount of water, but if that water source is bad and it's polluted, well, you can still end up with bad fruit and bad leaves. You can still end up with symptoms, dysfunction. So only when your source is good, your beliefs match your needs, so your behaviors supply what you need, then you will have healthy fruit and healthy leaves. And so all of these things need to be in place in order for you to truly be healthy. Now, I want to highlight one other need. First of all, a question. I know you're all muted, but you can answer in your own locations until we unmute later. The question is this: how many of you do not need love? Anybody there that does not need love? Well, I have traveled many countries. I have spoken to many audiences, and I have asked that question to most of them. And I haven't found anybody yet that does not need love. Everybody I have found needs love. Now, why do we need love? We need love because of what we are. Remember, what or who you are determines what you need. Since we are human beings, we need love. Now, every need that we have, where does it reside? Does it reside at the thing we need? Does it reside within us, or does it reside outside of us? Well, the thing we need resides outside of us. Just like the oxygen, water, and food, it must be brought in order for us to have it so that we might live by it. The same thing is true for love. Love resides outside of us, not inside of us. It resides outside of us, and it must be brought in order for us to live by it. Now, somebody may argue, as I have had in the past in audiences, that no, the love resides inside. I produce all the love that I need. So my challenge to that question was, if you, or that idea, that belief, if that's the case, if love resides inside, then solitary confinement is no punishment at all. If love resides inside, to be isolated in a jail cell with no human interaction, yes, you can be given your food and your water and have a toilet and a little sunlight and whatever. Solitary confinement would not be a problem if love was something that we could generate on our own. But it's not. It's something that's outside, and we must have access. We must bring it in. Now, what is the thing that brings it in? What is the behavior or the action that brings in love? Let's imagine you don't have to actually be in somebody's presence. I did student mission work in Belize for a year, and while I was gone, every day, my girlfriend at the time, my wife now, every day she wrote me a letter. She wrote me a letter to tell me what was going on, in her life and so on. And the university that I was going to would mail the letters out to all of those students that were in foreign locations. And so she never had to pay postage. She just had to buy the card stock to put it on and the letter to put it in and so on. And then the university paid the shipping. Well, every day that I was gone, she wrote a letter. So I didn't have much contact, because back then we didn't have WhatsApp or other things that could communicate across across country lines, except for old-fashioned telephone. And that was expensive, and so it was infrequent that we got to talk to each other, but I got letters frequently. And when I got a letter, I would sit down and I would read it. And in reading it, I knew how her day went. I knew who she was working with. I knew what was going on in her life and so on. And I felt included. I felt like I belonged. I felt accepted, and I felt loved. Why did I feel that way? She wasn't even with me. All I was doing is looking at black on white and scribbles, but my mind was pulling the scribbles together to form letters, to form words, to form phrases and sentences and paragraphs and so on, until there was the understanding that this was written from love. Right? So the action that brings in love is thinking. It's thought. Thought is the thing that brings it in. And so if the thinking is if the source of the thoughts is a source that has the love that we need, then the thinking will match with the need, and we'll have healthy fruit and healthy leaves. Sorry. But if the thinking is different, if it's deviated, if the thinking does not match with the need, then there can be problems. What do I mean? How is it that it could not match with what it needs? Well, remember, you do what you do because you believe what you believe. So what can I believe about love that was wrong, so that I thought wrong about love and provided the wrong thing? Well, what about the source? What about the source of love? What is the source of love? Or what are the sources of love? Where can you find love, the love that you need? Well, I will challenge you, and later we will show how this is the case. I will challenge you that other people cannot be that source. Why can they not be that source? Because they're in need of the very same love that you need. Just like they need oxygen, water, and food, if you go to them as your source of oxygen, water, and food, then there's going to be a problem. You're going to suck all the air that they have. They're going to die, and you need another source really fast. You can try to squeeze all the water out of them. They die in the process, and, well, you run out pretty fast, and you need another source. Or you eat them up. You're cannibal. And, they die in the process, and you run out of your temporary source. And, and it's not the healthiest one either for you. So same thing with love. Love must come from outside of us. But how many people need love? Everybody does. Everybody does. So everybody must get it from outside of themselves. That means no human being is the source of it. But if I believe that others are the source of love that I need, then I'm going to go to that source to get it. But it's going to be a polluted source. It's not going to have all that I need. And so my thinking is going to be messed up. It's not going to supply the love that I really need. And then there's going to be symptoms that develop because of that: bad fruit and bad leaves. I hope that makes sense. If you've got questions, jot those down. Once we get to the end, then we'll unmute. We'll stop recording, we'll unmute, and we'll go over those questions. But we're going to be covering a lot of this in more detail in the next few days as we go together. It helps us to realize that everything that functions is governed by unchangeable laws. For example, like in our body, blood sodium levels. Blood sodium levels are between around 135 to 145 milliequivalents per deciliter. That's the concentration of sodium in the blood that should be there. It's true for human beings, regardless of where you live. You could live in North America, South America, Africa, Asia. And it doesn't matter. If you're a human being, then that's what your blood sodium level should be, because that's the law that governs the function of blood sodium in human beings. Blood pH should be between 7.35 and 7.45. Some people believe that they should be alkaline. Well, you are, right? 7.35 to 7.45 is alkaline, and that's blood pH. Not every fluid or every compartment in the body has the same pH. It changes and it's different in different compartments, but for the blood, it's 7.35 to 7.45. 7 is neutral, and anything below 7 is acidic, and anything above 7 is alkaline. So we are alkaline, but let's say that somebody believes that they need to really be alkaline, and so they drink alkaline water and they eat an alkaline diet and they take sodium bicarbonate, baking soda, and other things like that in order to push their pH up. And so they do, and they go from 7.4 to 7.45 to 7.5 to 7.55 to 7.6 to 7.65. Well, are they going to get healthier as they keep going along? Well, the answer is no. They're not going to keep getting healthier. They're going to get more and more unhealthy, and eventually they're going to die thinking that they're trying to get better. Why? Because the law does not care. The law doesn't pay attention to what you believe or not. It is what it is. And if your belief does not match with what the law is, well, you can run yourself into some pretty bad dysfunction by unknowingly going against the law. Body temperature is around 98.6 degrees Fahrenheit, 37 degrees Celsius. There is some range to that. It's not just an exact number, but definitely if you start getting into the 104 range or 40 degrees Celsius, you know something's wrong, right? Something is wrong by the time you get there. So, or if it's in the opposite direction and it's going cold, like you see in this picture with this poor guy. That's all frozen here. Let's say that you have a child that watches some movie or something that they get this idea that you can have these frozen characters and it's all cool to be like that, and didn't mean that pun, but it went there anyways. And anyway, so they decide that it's wintertime and 30 below, and they're going out naked out in the snow and enjoying it because they just want to be like that character. So is that going to work? Well, no, it's not going to work. Even if they're fully convinced that it's going to work, it's not going to work. Why? Because they're going outside of the law, and the law doesn't change just because of what you believe. So these laws are laws that govern the function of human beings, and it doesn't matter if you're tall or short, you're wide, you're skinny. It doesn't matter if you've got black skin, blue skin, green skin, white skin, brown skin. It doesn't matter, and it doesn't matter what you believe about it. The law is what the law is. And speaking of law, you think of speeding tickets. Well, let's talk about the road, the pathway. This is the pathway of health. And on this pathway, it's comfortable. Things function well, right? And when you get off the pathway on one way or the other, then you begin to have more discomfort, more dysfunction. Now, there's certain things that you need on this road in order to survive well. You need certain things that you need, like oxygen and water and food that we talked about before. You also need a certain temperature or warmth. You can't exist with a body temperature of -2 degrees, it's just not going to work. Or with 120 degrees, it's not going to work either. So you've got to have a certain temperature range in which you function as well. And we're going to take that one as our example because it's an easy one for us to relate to. So let's just imagine that your temperature goes up. Now, your temperature is going up above the limit of normal. Above the limit of normal. You're getting outside of the law. How are you going to feel? Is it going to feel good or feel bad? Well, it's going to feel bad. You're going to have symptoms. You have symptoms, and those symptoms don't feel good. And one of the purposes of those symptoms is to motivate you to do something about where you're at so that you might get back. You see, we could care less about the law, and in fact, most of the time, we don't even know about the law. You know, how many people pay attention to how much sodium is in your food, or how much potassium is in your food, or how much cadmium is in your food, or other things like that, or how much vitamin E that you're getting in the things that you consume. Most of us are not thinking about that, and if you asked me even what the proper blood levels are for any of those things well, I'd have to go look it up in a book, because really we could care less what the law is. What we care about is how we feel. And so when we deviate from the law, guess what? It starts to feel bad. We have a warning signal. It's like the rumble strips on the side of the road. When you start going off the side of the road and it starts going, right? That's a warning sign that something's wrong and you need to do something about it. In fact, one day while I was on my trauma surgery rotation, and I lived about 15, 20 minutes away from the trauma center and the medical school where I was at, I got on the highway and I started driving down the road, and after being on call and up for about 36, 40 hours and having about 4 hours of sleep before that, I fell asleep at the wheel. And I woke up on the rumble strips. And I praise God there were rumble strips to go bzzz and to wake me out of my sleep, because otherwise it would have been a concrete barrier that was coming next. And but I did wake up and I did manage to stay awake the rest of my short trip home. And so rumble strips are good. Rumble strips are good. They have a good purpose, even though we don't like driving on them. Same thing with symptoms. Symptoms are good. It's good to have the capacity to have symptoms because they let you know that something's wrong. It's true on the other side of the road as well, that on the other side, we also will end up having symptoms if we deviate from the law this way. It just feels different. This way, you feel hot. What do you do about it? You decrease layers of clothing, you fan yourself, you drink something cold, you do other types of things like that. This way, you go opposite. You cover up, you shiver, you decrease your body surface area so you don't get rid of so much heat to the environment and so on. You do all of these things so that you can get back and be comfortable. Really, that's the objective, is we want to be comfortable. We don't like being miserable with the symptoms. Now, what happens if when you are, let's say that your symptom is pain. The symptom you have when you go off the road is pain. And now, instead of looking for the cause and taking away the cause, this time what you do is you take a medication to limit the pain. You take an over-the-counter anti-inflammatory medication like ibuprofen or something like that. All right, so that works for a while. You feel better. There's not as much pain there, but is the problem gone? Well, no, the problem, did the medication take the problem away? No, the medication didn't take the problem away. It just took the manifestation of it. Well, over time, it's not working so well, and so you take some more medication and some more medication. Maybe you're on 3 medications like we talked about before. What happens now with the road, apparently? What does that appear that's happening to the road? What happens is it appears that the road is getting wider and wider and wider. Why? Because you can go farther and farther off the road without feeling the pain. You get farther and farther off without having any symptoms associated with it. In essence, what you've done, you have not widened the road because the road stays the way it is. The law is what it is. It doesn't change. The edges of the road are always where the edges of the road are. But what you've done is you've taken the rumble strips and you've moved them farther and farther off the road. Now, you don't know whether you're on the road or not. And you can easily drive off the road and think that you're on the road. You see, this is a problem with medication that just treats symptoms and taking it over a long period of time. Now, I'm not saying that there's anything wrong with taking medication, pain medication on a short-term basis. I mean, if I'm doing something and I cut my finger off, well, give me something, right? I'll be very happy to take some pain medication at that time. But I should be worried about the cause and working on taking care of the cause, right? Like find the finger, bring it to the surgeon, to the hospital with me, see if they can sew the thing back on, and so on and so forth. Now, and taking medication in the meantime while that's happening, sure, that's fine. Let's go, go ahead and do that. But when it comes long-term, then we have problems, because here now we're driving where we don't know where the edge of the road is. Doing symptom management is like having a fire in your home and the fire alarm is going off and you don't like the fire alarm, and so you turn its volume down or you turn it off. You haven't taken care of the fire, you've only taken care of the alarm. There's nothing wrong with the alarm. It is doing exactly what it's supposed to do. It is functioning well. But when you put the pillow over the alarm and then you go back to sleep when there's smoke still in the house, that's a problem. But that's what most of us are doing when it comes to health. We're just masking the symptoms so that we don't feel it so much, and it takes away our urge to find the cause so that we might fix the thing. So what happens if you don't stop at symptoms? What if you keep going and you keep deviating farther and farther off the road? Well, you're eventually going to get to disease. That's the next stop down the road. You really have dysfunction. You've gone from from proper function to slight dysfunction. Now you're getting to more dysfunction the farther you go off. And now it really feels bad. The symptoms start accumulating and compounding on each other. Now, not only does it hurt, you've got not only is it hot, but now your head is pounding and you're fuzzy thinking, and maybe you're vomiting and you're feeling sick to your stomach and confused and so on. Now you really got to do something about it, because you're really in trouble. It's really a problem. And maybe you even need to get help or accept help. And so that brings in the discussion about the pride line. There's this line somewhere out here called the pride line. And once you go across that line, once the symptoms and whatever is bad enough, then you're willing to ask for help or accept help so that you can get back. Now, my experience, my clinical career has shown me that the pride line for women is somewhere around in here, and the pride line for men is somewhere out here, right? So the guys are going to die before they ever venture into the doctor's office because they're afraid that fingers are going to go in wrong places and so on. So that's just been my observations from clinical practice. So you eventually get to this point where you're willing to accept help, ask for help, something. You got to do something desperately to get back, because if you don't, it's going to get really bad really fast. Well, the same thing happens on the other side. Instead of just having the symptoms of cold, now you have chilblains or frostbite or other things like that. It's really bad. It really hurts. You really got to do something about it right now, or it's really going to be a problem. Because if you don't stop at disease, if you keep going, where are you going to end up? Well, you're going to end up at death. You end up going from proper function to progressive dysfunction until you get to the place where you have no function. And somewhere out here in the disease land towards death, there's this place, there's this line called the point of no return. The point of no return. That point of no return is the place where you get to where you're not getting back. Doesn't matter what you're doing, you're not getting back here. You might have a little bit more existence in this land over here, but you're not getting back here. Now that's from a human standpoint. From God's standpoint, there's no such thing as a point of no return. Lazarus was dead in the tomb for 4 days, and he resurrected him. So even if you get to the point of death, that's not the point of no return for God. But from a human standpoint, there is a point of no return where you get to, and you're not getting back, and I'm not getting you back, and no one else is getting you back. So don't want to do that. We want to catch things early. In fact, we want to stay here. Maybe some of you are here watching, so you can figure out how you can stay here and not get off the road. My guess is most of you are here because, well, you're somewhere out here, and you recognize it, and you know that you need to get back. All right, so what else do we need? We need, what was it? Love. That's right, we need love. That we need also. So is it possible that there is a law that governs the function of love, and that law can be kept or it can be violated, and that if we violate that law, we can develop symptoms, disease, and even death? That within the confines of that law, there's proper function, but as we deviate from that law, we have progressive dysfunction until we get to the point where there's no function at all. Well, I submit to you that that indeed is the case. Now, when we consider breaking law, when we consider getting outside of the law, there's a few things that we need to ask ourselves. Well, first, a summary, and that summary is that health is proper function because the law is followed, and disease is dysfunction because the law is broken. Again, health, proper function because the law is followed, and disease is dysfunction because the law is broken. Now, that's not seeking to be legalistic or any other types of things like that. It's just the way it is. And that's just how law operates. So when we think about breaking the law, when we think of it in a spiritual sense, a Christian sense, what do you think of when you think of breaking the law? Well, one thing that comes to mind is sin. Sin is the breaking of the law, breaking the law. We read in 1 John 3:4, for sin is the transgression of the law or the breaking of the law, or in other translations, sin is lawlessness, right? Living as if there is no law. Interestingly enough, symptom treatment without getting to the cause promotes lawlessness. It promotes transgressing the law, but a deception along with it so that you don't realize that you're doing so. It's quite tricky, quite interesting. Now, what law? Well, it's talking about God's law, breaking God's law, that breaking of the law. And the foundation of God's law is love, right? He is love. Jesus told us in Matthew 22:37-40, says, you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind. This is the first and great commandment, and the second is like it, you shall love your neighbor as yourself. On these two commandments hang all the law and the prophets. So the foundation of God's kingdom, the foundation of his character, the foundation of his law is love. So if the breaking of that law might lead to disease, then a conclusion that we can come to is that disease in many cases is the result of a love problem. Again, disease in many cases is the result of a love problem. And we will get deeper into this so that we understand it all together. So before we go on to the next analogy, we need to understand a little bit the cause and effect, the law of cause and effect. Everybody's familiar with the law of cause and effect. You kick a rock and the rock kicks you back. Law of cause and effect. Well, it doesn't necessarily kick you back, but every action has an equal and opposite reaction. So you run 10 miles an hour into the wall. Well, the wall doesn't want to move, and you stop really fast, and there's an effect associated with it. You are pruning a tree and you fall out of the branches. Well, there's a cause, it's called gravity, and then there's an effect, which is the stopping of your movement, your motion, when you get to the ground, and then that becomes a cause of the next effect, which is your broken bones and your bruises and so on. So we have plenty of experience with cause and cause and effect is a fundamental law of nature. It's a fundamental law of nature. Everything operates in the context of cause and effect. Everything, there's not an exception. Everything operates in the context of cause and effect. So we understand this, and I'm just going to enumerate it. I'm just going to list it out for us, just so we're on the same page. But we all know this intuitively because we've experimented with it throughout our lives. Every effect must have a cause. Nothing happens for nothing's sake. There's always something that causes something to happen. And every cause doesn't just sit there and twiddle its thumb, it produces an effect. Every cause produces an effect. The cause always comes before the effect does, and the effect always comes after the cause, but shortly after, sometimes so shortly after you can't tell the time difference between the two, but the effect never comes before the cause, and the cause never comes after the effect is in place. Always the cause first, the effect follows. And if the effect is present, so you still have the effect over here, if the effect is present, then the cause must still be present, or its secondary causes, because the effect can't create itself. And that's very good, and that's why we want to understand the cause, because if you can understand what the cause is, and you can remove the cause, then the effect must begin to go away. And so I'm interested in causes. I'm not just interested in symptoms, although I do want to help individuals with their symptoms, but I want to know the cause because I want the cause to be removed. Now, another way that we can understand the law of cause and effect is by understanding the laws of thermodynamics, or the laws of energy. And one of those laws states here that all energy necessary for a system to function must come from outside that system. So whatever system that you're talking about, however big and complex and however many components that it has, whatever part of that system that you take, it must only operate based upon energy that it gets from outside of it. If it has no energy coming to it from the outside of it, it can't function, or it cannot continue its function. And so if I take my phone, if I take my cell phone, and this is a system, if I try for this phone to function without any energy from the outside of it, it's not going to function. But you tell me, but you can turn it on right now and it'll function. Well, yeah, it's true. It's connected to a source. It's connected to a battery. But let's take that battery and let's empty it completely, because it had, well, how did you get energy in the battery? You had to plug it in, didn't you? Yeah, if you don't plug it in, it's not going to recharge itself. It has to have energy from outside of it in order to get the thing going. So all energy necessary for a system to function must come from outside that system. And it's true not just for mechanical systems, it's true for biological systems and every type of astronomical systems and so on as well. And because of this, you and I cannot create a perpetual motion machine. Now, many people have tried to create perpetual motion machines, and in fact, if you go on Google, you can Google perpetual motion machines, and you can find a whole ton of them, but they're not really perpetual motion because they're dependent upon sunlight or light from the overhead lights or whatever, or gravitational force or Earth's rotation or something that you're just not paying attention to. If it truly had no force from the outside working on it, it wouldn't work, wouldn't function. So the effect, therefore, because of this need for energy outside of it, the effect, whatever it is, whatever it looks like, that system that is the effect, it cannot produce itself. It can't produce itself. The cause is the thing that must bring the energy in order for that effect to happen. And the cause always is outside of the effect, always outside of the effect. Because the energy always has to come from outside the system. So the cause is never in the same place that the effect is. It's always in a separate location. And if you want to guarantee to never find a cause, then just look where the effect is at and you will never find the cause, because the cause can't be there by law. The cause has to be elsewhere. So let's say that you have a tumor. You've got a cancer. And that tumor, let's say prostate cancer. You got a gentleman with prostate cancer, and that tumor, you get a biopsy, and you take a biopsy of that tumor tissue, and you take it out and you look at it. Guess what? That biopsy can never tell you. That biopsy can never tell you why you have the cancer. Never, never, because the why had to come outside of there. Right? So if you have breast cancer on the left side, right side, or whatever, then if you do a biopsy, it's only going to tell you what the thing is. It'll never tell you why the thing is, because the why had to come outside of it. Now, let's understand cells. Let's go to the cell and go to a cellular level so that we can understand that as well. This is going to be the last analogy, the last description for today's or this evening's presentation, and then we'll go on tomorrow and the next day and so on. So the cells, you have 150 to 100 trillion cells in your body, and you have over 250 different types of cell. And each type of cell has a particular function. And the cells are kind of like factories producing a product. For example, in your pancreas, you have beta islet cells, and those beta islet cells are responsible for producing insulin. Those are the cells of the body that produce insulin. And let's imagine that you have 10 billion beta islet cells. Well, if you have a cause that comes in that starts picking off those beta islet cells one by one, and it picks off 1 and 2, and every second it picks off 3 and 4 and 5 and 6 and so on, right? Well, it would take you a long time before you ever noticed that there was a problem. Why? Because we know from biology and cellular biology that you have to lose about half of your cell's population or half of their function before you actually really manifest any problems from a body standpoint. So you would have to pick off 5 billion of those beta islet cells. If you had 10 billion, you'd have to pick off 5 billion before you actually started having anything that was an inkling of diabetes or type 1 diabetes. And so you can have a cause that's in place, and it can be in place for quite a while. In fact, sometimes years, sometimes a few decades that it can be in place before there's a manifestation of the problem. Type 2 diabetes, it's estimated that there's at least a 10-year period of it developing before one starts developing actual diabetes, right? You're diagnosed with it. So there's a long process that's been in place before one actually gets there. Even though right when the cause comes, it begins producing an effect. It begins knocking out those beta islet cells and doing its damage, but it might take time for the damage to get big enough to be noticed. A cell is like a factory, and every factory needs certain things in order to be able to function. One of the things that a factory needs in order to be able to function and produce a product is raw materials. Now, we're just going to imagine that there's a nucleus and Golgi apparatus and endoplasmic reticulum and ribosomes and, mitochondria and other different cellular components that are in here. And we'll just assume that they're there. So you've got the factory, you've got the workers, now you've got the raw materials. You've got to have raw materials because no factory actually creates anything new. All it does is rearrange the things that are there already. Again, it doesn't create anything new. It just rearranges those things that are there already. And so the raw materials that the cell uses are the things we've talked about already. It's your oxygen, it's your water, it's your nutrients, right? These are all different chemicals. You have different chemicals, and those chemicals are the raw materials that the cells use in order to produce their product. So if your cells bring in chemicals as their raw materials, what is it that it's going to put out? It's going to put out chemicals. That's right. So your cells are like chemical factories. They take in chemicals as the raw material and the fuel, right? This includes the fuel for the cell, and it's going to put out chemicals as well. Now, how many cells of your body need oxygen, water, and food? All of them, of course. All the ones that you want to keep alive, at least. So where does the oxygen come in? It comes in your nose, your mouth, goes into your lungs. How is it going to get to your toes? Where does the water and food come in? Well, it comes in your mouth, go down your esophagus, to your stomach, digestive tract, and so on. How is it going to get to your other parts? So how is it going to get there? It's got to have a vehicle that transports it. And the transporting vehicle is the blood. The blood is vital. In the Bible, it says the life is in the blood. That's right. The life is in the blood. Why is that the case? Because the blood is the thing that carries all of the raw materials that the cells need in order for them to survive. And if you cut off the blood flow, then you're going to have serious problems. So a circulatory system, of course, is very important. What are some things that you can do that limit blood flow? Well, one of the things, of course, is eating a high cholesterol diet, not exercising very well, and having high cholesterol levels and having cholesterol blockages in the arteries, and that can limit the blood flow to certain areas of the body, which can then result in serious dysfunction if that blood flow gets limited severely. You can limit blood flow by cutting something off, cutting an artery, and so on. That can cause definite problems with any blood flow beyond there. You can have blood flow issues. One thing that people don't think of very often is having tight bands around their waist or other parts of their body, their clothing that fits too tightly. That starts to restrict blood flow to certain areas, and that can cause chronic long-term circulatory issues. Another thing from a clothing standpoint is to unevenly clothe the body. So, you know, you wear a shirt, you wear shorts, but the rest of the legs are hanging out, the rest of the arms are hanging out, and so the arms and the legs are chilling constantly, constantly cooler than the parts that are covered, and so blood vessels respond to that. Cooler environments, it constricts; warmer environments, it dilates. So you end up having a concentration of blood in the trunk and the core of the body, and you have a paucity or a lower level of blood in the extremities, and then that takes its toll, not right away, it takes years of that to really mess up circulation, and then you end up having poor blood flow to the extremities, not tolerating the cold very well, you know, spider veins, varicose veins, other types of things like that might be a consequence of that. So blood and circulation is vitally important. But even if you get all the blood that you need to and all the raw materials and all the fuel that you need to the cell, the factory still can't work, can't function. For example, if you have a vehicle and the vehicle is sitting there and you fill it up with gasoline, it's still not going to run just because you filled it up with gasoline. What does it need in order to run? Well, you got to start the thing. And what is the thing that starts it? The thing that starts it is energy. And in this case, with the cells, it's electricity. The cells function by electricity. You can take the nucleus out of most cells and they will continue to function, except that they don't have the blueprint to produce new materials. So they'll continue to function with the materials that they have and do just fine, thank you very much, because the nucleus actually doesn't control the functions of the cell on a regular basis. It's the membrane, it's the cell membrane that does that. And it's an electrical function. And you have a negative charge compared to the outside inside the cell, and so if you put a voltmeter out here and another one in there, you would find a voltage difference of about negative 70 to negative 90 millivolts. There is a resistance to flow across this membrane. Resistance is an electrical term. When you open up the pores in the cell membrane, then you can get movement of charged particles in and out. That's current. So you have voltage, you've got current, you've got resistance. That's all electrical language. The cells function as little electrical units. Yes, there's chemistry too. So we call it electrochemical energy. Right? Electrochemical energy. You got to have the fuel, but you also have to have the spark. You have to have the energy too that's coming to it. So what is the spark? What's the spark? Where does it come through for all the cells? It comes through the nervous system. It comes through the nervous system. The nervous system is the organ system that is providing this electricity, this spark, this control. Every cell of your body needs to be controlled in its function. Every tissue, every organ system needs to be integrated so that it works well with the other organs and organ systems, so that you as an organism can function well. And it's the nervous system that controls all of that. Again, it's the nervous system that controls all of that. So how many cells of your body need the spark? How many cells of your body need that electricity to function? How many cells of your body need the control to continue their function properly? The answer is all of them. So how are you going to get it there? What's the pathway? What's the vehicle that gets it there? When it came to the raw materials and the fuel, it's the blood. But when it comes to the energy, the electricity, it's not the blood. The influence of the mind on the body as well as the body on the mind should be emphasized. The electric power of the brain promoted by mental activity vitalizes the whole system and is thus an invaluable aid in resisting disease. Truly, truly, that is the case. It's the electric power of the brain that vitalizes. Vitalize means to give life to the whole system. You cut out the brain, sorry, not going to work very long. So what is the vehicle? It's the nerves. The transmission of this electricity is through nerves. Those nerves might not get to every cell of the body, but they're going to get to endocrine organs and release hormones and so on that are going to then go to those different parts of the body. In fact, a good portion of your adrenal glands are actually nervous tissue, releasing neurohormones and so on. And anyway, so that gets to all the cells of the body so that you can control their function. And that's great. That's wonderful. Now we have the pipes bringing all of the nutrients that we need and the fuel, and we have the lines bringing the energy, the electricity to the cells for their function. And when you've got the electricity and you've got the fuel together, then this thing functions. Now, the nervous system, we said the nervous system is where this electricity comes through. But remember the laws of thermodynamics. It said that all energy necessary for a system to function must come from where? From outside of that system. So where is the nervous system going to get the electricity, the energy, in order to generate the electricity for the spark? Where is it going to get that from? It has to be outside of itself. By law, it has to be outside of itself. And guess what? It's not the food. That's the raw materials. That's the fuel. Where does it get the energy for the spark that's going to be carried through the nervous system to the different cells of the body? That comes from outside of the nervous system. It comes from something else. Let me read this first. The mind controls the whole man, yet many spend all their lives without becoming intelligent in regard to the casket or the body that contains this treasure. So the mind, what is it that controls the whole man? The mind. The mind. All the physical organs are the servants of the mind, and the nerves are the messengers that transmit its orders to every part of the body, guiding the motion of the living machinery. So let's get into that. The nervous system, the brain, is not the mind. Right? I would just state that right now. The brain is not the mind. The brain is part of the mind. You have to have the brain in order for the mind to function, but the brain does not constitute everything that makes up the mind. The nervous system gets its electricity from thoughts. All right, so you're probably saying, hang on, I've heard it differently all my life. It's actually the electrical activity in the nervous system that generates thought. Well, yes, you've heard it that way all your life because that's what the neuroscientists have believed. They believe that thought is the effect of what? The effect of electricity in the proper structure of the brain. But they just haven't been reading the right owner's manual. You see, the Bible says that in the beginning, God. In the beginning, God. Now, did the earth create God? Okay. Did the sun create God? Did the moon create God? No. All right, so all of those were created by God. When we read the instruction manual, the Bible, we find out that the first thing was God, and God is spirit. We read that in the Bible as well. So the very first thing was spirit, and from spirit, you said the Spirit of God hovered over the face of all of the waters, right? And from spirit came everything that is physical. Now in Genesis 1:27, we're told that he created them in his image, male and female, he created them, right? So we were created in the image of God, which means that we're created to function like God functions. And our function does not begin with the physical, our function begins with the spiritual. How much do thoughts weigh? What is their anatomic weight? What is their density? How many protons, neutrons, and electrons makes up thought? Well, the answer is none, because it's really not physical. Right? Now, I use the word thought here. If I want to be more specific, which I do right now, then I would say spiritual information. This is spiritual information. In order to truly have thought, yes, you have to have the nervous system and electricity, but spiritual information comes to the nervous system, and when it generates electricity, then that becomes thought, right? So thought is a process of things inside the brain plus things outside of the brain. And what is it, if you have something that is everything that you need, Everything that you need must be brought into the body by some organ or organ system. And here you have spiritual information, which itself is spiritual. So you need an organ or an organ system that is itself spiritual, that brings that into the body, and that is your spirit. That's your spirit, right? You were made not just with body, you were made with spirit as well. And so the mind is a combination of the brain and the spirit, the spiritual information and the electricity. And when all of that comes together, then you have thought, right? And you have thought. The scientists just have it backwards. They can't see this part, they can't study this part, they can't test this part, or so on, except as it responds in different things. And so science believes that everything spiritual is explained by everything that's physical, where in reality, the physical actually came from the spiritual. So it's through the spirit that spiritual information comes to the nervous system. When it comes to the nervous system, it generates electrical activity here in the cortex of the brain, which can be measured. That whole process we call thought. That then is then transmitted down the various nerves of the body to the different cells so that they can be empowered and so that they can be controlled in their function. Now, we're told that the brain nerves that connect the whole system are the medium that connect with the whole system, are the medium through which heaven communicates with man and affects the inmost life. So it is through the brain, it is through these nerves, the cortex, that God communicates with man. Now, your spirit is not the generator of this spiritual information. It's the transmitter of that spiritual information. There is a source or sources that it must come from. And what we see here is that the need of the spirit is love. Your toenails don't need love. Your hair endings don't need love. Your lips don't need love. Yeah, we won't go there. But no part of your body actually needs love. What it needs is the effect of love. It's your spirit that needs love, and the spirit must take that love, and when it does so, through spiritual information, again, like reading the love letter from your loved one, it then, when that strikes the nervous system, it generates electricity. You have thought, you think about that. That's transmitted down the nerves to the different cells of the body in order to control their function. So we were created that way so that we might function that way. So the brain and everything that it's attached to that we can interact with and touch is the body. This is the spirit, and the combination of the two form the soul or the mind. So the mind is more than just the brain. It includes the brain and the spirit together. We are told in Genesis 2 and verse 7, and the Lord God formed man of the dust of the ground and breathed into his nostrils the breath of life, and man became a living being. In other words, God took dust, added to that his breath, and he became a living being. He took the body, he added to it the spirit, and that became a living soul, or the mind. Now, where is the soul? Where is the mind? What is it that makes you what you are? Well, you can cut off your finger and you're still you. You can cut off your hand and still you. You can cut off your arm and you're still you. You can cut off both your arms and still you. You can cut off all your arms and your legs and you can still be you. You can even cut off a bit of your digestive tract and your urinary system, except for your kidneys. Well, you can cut out one of them and you're still you. You can cut out the other one and put someone else's in the place and you're still you. You could have a liver transplant and you're still you. You can have a lung transplant, a heart transplant. In fact, you can transplant almost everything in your body and you're still you. There's only one thing you can't transplant and still be you. It's right here. Right? So the soul is here. The mind is here. It's the thing that makes you what you are. Right? So we were created in the image of God. In the image of him, he created them, male and female, he created them. We were created then to think like God thinks. When our thinking is in line with God's thinking, he is a God of love. He says, I know, in Jeremiah 29 and verse 11, he says, I know the thoughts that I think toward you, says the Lord, thoughts of peace and not of evil, to give you a future and a hope. Right? So he has thoughts of peace, not of evil, of good for us. He is a God of love. And when our thoughts align with his thoughts of love, then that provides exactly the generation of electricity that we need in the right places of the cortex to be carried down to the right places in the body in order to control the function of those cells and empower them. But when the foundation of the thoughts is not on love, when it's not love, then there is a dysfunctional signal that is sent. That dysfunctional signal is converted into a wrong electrical current, or a wrong, wrong electrical current. That is then transmitted down the nerves to the different cells of the body, and instead of having proper function, you end up having dysfunction associated with it. So your thoughts, your attitudes, that which you think upon, has a huge impact upon whether your cells function well or whether they don't, and whether you have dysfunction or not. And you might say, okay, well, how come I might have a problem in one area but not another area? Well, because these thoughts, this spiritual information, can be mediated to different locations on the cortex. And depending on what location on the cortex that it's mediated will depend on what neural pathway it ends up going through and where it ends up in the body, causing dysfunction. And tomorrow we're going to look at the causes of dysfunction. We'll dive in this some more, and then we're going to start looking at our needs. What do our needs tell us, and what kind of trouble we run into when we don't understand this stuff well. So that's a brief overview. It's a very fast overview, but I hope it's one that's been helpful for you. I am going to stop sharing the screen right now. Oh yeah, by the way, this comes from the book, The Law of Life. You can find that on Amazon or Yuchi Pine's gift shop, or on betterlivingcreations.com. I will not nearly be able to cover, I'm going to be picking and choosing. So I'm going to cover as much as I can during this week. There's a whole lot I'm not going to be able to cover. You're going to find that in the book. And so I recommend that. Of course, it's a biased recommendation because I wrote the thing. So I am going to stop recording, and then I'm going to unmute you, and then we can take some questions, and we'll give you some instructions for tomorrow.